There's a strange moment many people experience in life. Nothing is broken, your responsibilities are being handled. Your life from the outside might even look stable, maybe even successful. But somewhere beneath all of that, something begins to feel off. Not dramatically wrong, just slightly misaligned. And that's what makes it confusing because when life appears to be working on the outside, it becomes very difficult to explain why something in the inside feels unsettled. My name is Caren, and this is The Rewrite, a podcast about finding the courage to pursue the life you already know you're meant to live. Because most people already sense when something in their life needs change. And the real challenge isn't discovering that truth. The challenge is being honest enough to face it. When something in life is clearly broken, the path forward becomes quite obvious. If a job becomes unbearable, people eventually leave. If a relationship becomes destructive, the problem is undeniable. But there's another kind of situation that's much harder to navigate, and that's a life that works. A life that's responsible, predictable, stable. From the outside, everything appears to be functioning, and yet internally, something begins to feel out of sync or misaligned. And that's the kind of situation that traps people the longest because it's difficult to justify changing something that technically isn't broken. And it's important to understand something here. Recognizing that feeling doesn't mean you need to dismantle your entire life. Many of us at this stage already carry real responsibilities, careers, families, and commitments we take seriously. Alignment doesn't mean abandoning those things. Sometimes it's about allowing something that's been quietly waiting inside you to finally have a place in your life. A skill you want to develop, a voice you've been hesitant to use, or a dream you've carried for years but never given yourself permission to pursue. Alignment doesn't mean abandoning the things that you've built. It means being honest about what's missing from it. Stability is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. We are naturally wired to protect what's predictable. Predictability feels responsible, it feels mature, it feels safe. But stability can also quietly become a trap because stability rewards consistency, even when that consistency is slowly pulling us away from who we're meant to become. And when that happens, a quiet internal tension begins to develop. On one hand, your life is functioning, but on the other hand, something inside you keeps asking a question that's hard to ignore. Is this really the life I'm meant to be living? Now, when that question first appears, most people don't confront it immediately. They begin questioning themselves, and you begin wondering if you're just being impatient or ungrateful or unrealistic. So instead of exploring that feeling, you start negotiating with it. And you tell yourself, maybe this is what life looks like at this stage. It is what it is. Maybe I should focus on being grateful for what I have. And let me be very clear. Gratitude is super important and should be one of the foundational parts of our lives. But gratitude should never become a reason to ignore misalignment. In fact, if you're finding yourself in this moment honestly recognizing that something feels misaligned and wanting it to change, that's actually something to be grateful for. Because that awareness is growth, even if it's quiet growth. Misalignment usually doesn't show up in dramatic ways. More often, it starts as a subtle internal tension and restlessness. A sense that your energy is being drained instead of expanded, or the feeling that you're capable of more, but not quite sure where that more belongs yet. Sometimes it feels like living inside a routine that no longer fits the person that you've become. And the most confusing part is that nothing about your life necessarily looks wrong. Your life might be responsible, stable, respectable, but something inside you keeps asking the same question. Is this really it? Because I feel like there's something more meaningful. I've experienced this tension myself, and for a long time, my life looked stable. I showed up where and how I needed to show up. I handled many of my responsibilities, and I did the things you're supposed to do, sometimes well, sometimes imperfectly. But underneath all of that was an awareness I couldn't keep ignoring, which is a simple fact that I hadn't fully stepped into the things I felt called to do. And the longer I postponed that awareness, the stronger the tension became. Not because my life was falling apart, but because I knew I wasn't fully living in a life I was meant to live. Rewrites rarely begin with clarity. They sometimes begin with friction, a quiet internal recognition that sometimes feels slightly off. And ignoring that friction requires energy to suppress and rationalize it, energy to maintain what no longer fits. And once that awareness becomes clear, it's very difficult to ignore. Many people believe the turning point in life happens when everything falls apart. But often, the real turning point begins much, much earlier. It begins the moment you stop ignoring what you already know. The moment you acknowledge that something inside you has been quietly asking for your attention. And instead of silencing that voice, you allow yourself to listen to it. That moment doesn't require a dramatic change. Sometimes it simply requires honesty and the willingness to respond to it. So here's something worth thinking about. Where in your life does something feel slightly off? Not broken or catastrophic, just off, out of sync, misaligned. And if that feeling has been present for a while, what might it be trying to tell you? Because sometimes the most important changes in life don't begin with action, they begin with recognition. Understanding misalignment is often the first step toward rewriting your life. Not overnight, not all at once, but gradually through honesty, awareness, and eventually courage. And that's exactly what this podcast is here to explore. If this conversation gave you something to reflect on, subscribe and continue with me in the next episode. Thank you for being here with me today, and I hope you are able to take something meaningful with you from this. This is The Rewrite, because your story isn't finished yet.